Welcome to the Disrupt Leaders podcast. It is episode 5, take 2, because one of us, I'm not going to name any names, I'm not going to call anyone out, Julz, one of us stopped up the recording last time, and so we're here back again, recording it for a second time. So we have got an absolute banger of an episode today. It is a little bit different to what we originally had planned. So Julian, the handsome devil himself, went and read Diary of a CEO. And in the previous video, he came in and basically I had to guess what the concepts were just based off the title. Obviously now I know the concepts, so we're not going to do that. And so what we're going to do for you today instead is Julian's going to give us a run through of these concepts, and then him and I are going to break them down and just get into a more frontline level, something that's more tangible, more usable to you, to me in our day-to-day life. What do you say, Jules? You ready to kick it off for the second time?
Yes, 100%, Bill. Thank you for absolutely destroying my credibility amongst the few listeners that we do currently have. But thank you so much. I'm still happy to share the book with you and get your thoughts. And essentially, as you said before, we made that first promise in our very first intro video around our place in this leadership spectrum of podcasts that you see out there is we take some of these high level CEOs and directors of companies, what they put out there, and we're going to dilute it down to the essences that are important for frontline leaders. And we can still do that with the Diary of a CEO, albeit a little bit of lack of credibility from Julian after the first cock up.
Because you do pretty much all the editing. So the fact that editor Julz has kept podcast Julz from being on very thin ice, let me tell you that, my friend. It was touch and go. So yeah, editor Julz, he saved you. He saved you, mate.
Before I kick on with the book, that's leadership tip number 1 for today's session is make yourself invaluable just in case you mess something up. Make yourself invaluable so you can't be made redundant in this case.
And
anyway,
definitely don't take up my leadership tip, which is blaming someone for something they have literally no control over. Because there are enough leaders that do that. So don't take my advice and listen to Julz's tip on that one. Fortunately for you, I have the world's most terrible memories. I have forgotten half the things, even though we only spoke about it 3-4 days ago. So hit me with it, Julz. What's the first one today?
Yeah, 100%. Before I do that, I want to quickly say Diary of a CEO, just for people who don't know, Steven Bartlett, he runs one of my favorite podcasts, which is the Diary of a CEO, obviously, but he's written a book. He's got 33 laws in there of things he's learned, he's picked up over his journey of being a leader, being a CEO. And so I've gone through that, as Bill said, and we want to dilute that down to a leadership level or frontline leadership level. And the first law that kind of stuck out to me, there's plenty on here that we've covered in our previous podcast. So I don't want to go through that too much and absolutely drag that through the mud again. But the first thing that's popped out for me is create an obligation to teach. Now, the theory around this is if you're a leader out there or just a person looking to master a certain topic, if you create an obligation to teach that topic, you're most likely to embed it. It happens time and time again where even in my personal life, I've seen this happen previously where I teach things. Even in uni, I used to teach people. I used to be like that nerd that everyone used to copy off. So like that kind of pressure that I used to need to be on top of my game forced me to learn some of those topics. And that's what kind of Steven's talking about here in terms of a creative obligation to teach. What's your opinion on it, Bill?
Yeah, I think it's something that as like a leader is a very useful skill, not necessarily just for yourself, but actually for your people. I think especially if you're someone that looks after a lot of new recruits or when you're trying to embed a change, getting some of the team to educate, empower the rest of the team is a really good way to get them to take their skills to the next level. And I think it's something that also reflects back in one-on-ones and in coaching sessions. Get them to explain the concept to you rather than you just explaining the concept out to them. I think that's also a real good tip in coaching sessions and one-on-ones. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, people have to find their own information. It also creates pathways in the brain. The psychology behind that is that if you learn how to help yourself, it just creates pathways. So sometimes you probably learned things in the past that you've had to teach other people. And sometimes when you don't do that thing for a long time and you go back to, you're still able to remember those things. But the things that I think you pick up as a job, like if you tell me now, go back to, I used to work in the branch in a bank before, and you get me to do telling again, I probably struggle with a lot of the systems because it's like other people taught me that. Whereas like the things that I've had to teach other people, I'd like burnt in there, and those pathways are forever embedded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just from another standpoint as well, another way to take this look, I think The obligation to teach to me also means something a little bit different around empowering your more senior consultants. I think it's something that a good leader, a good frontline leader does very well. You maybe won't have a formal 2IC in the team, but it's definitely always good to have an informal 2 or 3IC and get them to run coaching sessions, get them to run huddles. Something I'm a big believer on is most people in your team, especially in my team, and I know in previous teams you've managed, Julz, everyone will have their own strengths and everyone will have their own weaknesses. And I think it's really good to empower them to coach on their strengths to the rest of the team. If you've got someone who's just like really good at the customer service piece, getting really high, like voice of customer NPS scores all the time, get them to talk about what they do. Because sometimes I think it's very like introspective for them. They maybe don't even realize why they do what they do is successful. And so asking them, giving them like an hour, 2 hours here or there to put together a little prezzo to present to the team in the next team meeting or huddle can really get them to reflect on their own skills, what they actually do well. And then it might also help the rest of the team pick up those few little bits and pieces, those odd, crazy tips that they would have never thought of on their own. And I think it's just a really powerful tool. And in addition, that opportunity to present is something that I think really helps your team go to that next level and will really help with anyone that's looking to develop their career. And if they want to go into leadership or if they want to go into like the change management team, whatever the case may be, it's getting those skills in early. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it pumps you up as well, right? If your leader comes to you and goes, hey, mate, can you present on this thing that you're absolutely amazing at? You're like, oh, yeah, I am good at that. You talk about that. You also talk about you start to become the champion of that thing as well. If people tell you to present on something and you teach on something, you have to now be the expert on that thing, right? Like we spoke about one of our colleagues before was like a coach in denial. Now, the thing is, he knows that he needs to be on top of his game when he's buddying other people and coaching other people because that's the expectation of him and that's what people think his strength is. And therefore that part becomes a part of who you are. When you create an obligation to put that out there in the world, you also create accountability for yourself, you find a lot of the time.
Yeah. All right. I love it. I think that's that one. What's next? Hit me with it. Let's
100%. Go. The next one is you must not disagree. Now, the tenet behind that is you must not start a conversation with a disagreement. Because if you're trying to change someone's mind and you start off with a disagreement, you say, oh, no, I don't agree with that. Straight away, it's going to shut them off from whatever you're going to say next. So the
100%.
whole point is you start off by understanding what you have in common. What are those things that you can connect on? And the phrase that I used earlier in the week was, if you can find commonalities, you can solve your differences. So if you start off together, then it's easier to walk through things, understand each other. They know that you're also trying your best to connect with them on different levels, so they're more likely to listen to your opinion as well. What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, I think that there's probably 2 areas as a leader, as a frontline leader like myself and yourself, where that really becomes prevalent. I think the first is that first stream of expectation going upwards, my leader. I think sometimes very often the leader will come to you, they'll want you to do some things, maybe you won't necessarily agree, maybe they want to make a change that just does not land for you at all. And obviously at the end of the day, at some point you probably have to do it. But I think a good leader of yours will also be able to listen if you do have counter proposal points. But if you start that interaction by just going, this is a terrible idea, this sucks, or even being more polite and just being like, I don't think this is going to work, you laugh because I do that. I'm definitely the one that's in the meeting just being like, this is a terrible idea, this sucks. I'm not diplomatic at all. I wear my heart on my sleeve and I'm proud of it. But yeah, I think if you start the meeting like that, it is something that I've had to work on because you have to warm them up before you tell them it sucks. I've now realized in my twilight years. I think that's really important going upwards. What do you think, Julz?
100%. Like you said, you need to work on it. The funniest thing is this is something I've had to work on for a long time. I remember working in some of the entry-level roles that I worked into and I come up with great ideas, get shut down, or there'll be meetings and really big senior managers will be talking and I'll go, I don't think that's a great way to handle things. And they'll shut me down straight away. And so over time, I've learned to be a little bit more diplomatic, hold my tongue and just listen to what they're saying. And I can find any thread of, okay, that makes sense on that kind of level at least. Can I bring them down a little bit to my level and the way I'm thinking by telling them at least, hey, I understand where you're coming from. How about this though?
Yeah. And I think a really good way to have that interaction, like the way to handle that interaction instead, is to be curious, not judgmental. I stole that from Ted Lasso for those of you that have seen it, but it is very true. Be curious, not judgmental. If they give you an idea and it's not something you like at face value, ask a lot of questions. Because I don't know about you, I notice sometimes leadership are not great at communicating the why behind the decision. And sometimes when you get the why, all the pieces fall into puzzle and it does make sense and it is a better idea than you first thought. Sometimes it's not. And I think it's important both ways, because if you ask a lot of questions, really get to the heart of the understanding of what they're trying to achieve, why they're trying to achieve it, and then just be like, it's really interesting. Do you reckon if we did this instead, it would achieve the same thing? And you just offer your counter proposal. But at no point have you been like, no, I don't like your idea. Your idea sucks. It's more, you've asked a lot of questions, picked it to pieces, and then come in with a counter proposal. And I think you're just far more likely to be successful at getting a change embedded going through that way. I think the other way, moving on to the second way that I think this concept is really important, is the other stream of expectation that we considered number 1 and 2 is your people. I think sometimes you will have a coaching conversation with someone. Maybe you've played them a call. Maybe you've read one of their live chats. Maybe you're going through an interaction, a side-by-side observation you've done. And you'll maybe have an idea that you think that it was a terrible interaction, and you ask, and they will tell you, no, it was the best interaction of all time. Or it'll be something like that. And then maybe they won't agree with you. But I think sometimes you don't want to come straight out the gate and rip it apart. I think you definitely want to start again with questions. So how do you think that went? Oh, what do you think about the start, though? How do you think the customer felt when this was said? At no point have I said it was bad. At no point have I said those words. It's getting them to come to that realization through effective questioning. So I think,
100%.
in summary, if you've got a disagreement with someone, start with questioning. I think that's the easiest stuff.
100%.
Start by just picking it apart and asking lots of questions. It seems more effective.
Yeah. Third thing I want to bring up to you is you do not choose what you believe. Now, the idea behind this is that we've got so many beliefs, and a lot of them are created through experience we have, upbringing, and so many different things. But it's so hard to actually change your beliefs. It is actually a hard thing to do in a lot of things. And the example that he uses is if a person comes and kidnaps one of your loved ones and holds a gun to their head and tells you, hey, you have to say that you believe I am Jesus Christ, otherwise I'm going to shoot this person, right? You can lie to him and say, yeah, I do believe you're Jesus Christ. But the truth is, at that point, it'll be very hard to believe it's Jesus Christ, because it's just, you can't force yourself to believe something you just simply don't. So the thing around this is the way we change people's beliefs is not by challenging them, but giving them evidence otherwise, right? For instance, if that person holding the gun to this person's head suddenly had a glass of water, turned it into wine, you'd be like, oh, wait a minute.
Jesus Christ, can I get a glass of that, actually?
What
I wouldn't say no to a cheeky little...
You're convincing me.
Maybe turn 2 more glasses of water to wine. We'll have a couple more vinos, and then we'll see who's Jesus Christ, eh?
Here's a pool. Can you walk across it? Yes or no? And so you do something like that. Then you're like, okay, you've given me evidence to start to change my mind a little bit. So the thing around changing, it kind of follows on from that do not disagree piece. And a lot of things you said, Bill, which is ask questions. But you ask questions to identify things that you can then start to demonstrate evidence to this person to go, okay, I understand what you're thinking right now. How about this perspective? Or how about give this a go? And you give them enough evidence to overturn a lot of those beliefs that they might have, because you cannot change beliefs by just telling them that their beliefs are wrong or misfounded.
Right. Yeah, and I think that goes into literally every aspect of life, whether you're at work, no matter what it is, no matter what the belief it is, inside or outside of work. I think it's really important to know, and I said this previously, that's why I'm a big fan when it comes to coaching sessions, in really being thorough and prepared and having data and having facts and having evidence, because as I said before, the numbers don't lie. And it is so much harder if a consultant's trying to tell you, oh no, I'm amazing at this, and then the numbers are saying otherwise. It's so much easier to change their beliefs when you've got some measure of empirical proof. Otherwise, it's just your word versus theirs, and why should they listen to you? The one thing I will add to this as well, though, also be very mindful of your own beliefs, or letting other people instill beliefs in you without evidence. Now, I've spoken about this before. Like when taking over a new team, you'll probably find that leaders, sometimes senior leaders, will sit with you. They maybe give you a little run over of the team, or the previous leader will. Just be very mindful of what they say, because what they say is based on their own beliefs. It is not necessarily truth or fact. I'm not going to go into the full example, but I did speak in one of our previous episodes. I remember I took over a team and they were nailed on telling me I had a troublemaker as a girl. And it turned out they were just actively like making her life difficult. And that's why she was being difficult at work. And so you should be very guarded around letting people impact your beliefs without empirical evidence as a new leader.
Now, for those of you watching the Olympics right now, there's a story that's circulating in the Olympics. I don't know if you've seen this, Bill, like the Turkish guy. He's won silver medal. So yeah, I think for shooting. And everyone else in the kind of shooting thing, they're all wearing like those lenses that they wear for shooting. They're wearing the massive like ear protections. They've got like a sight thing on their hand. They've got all this different gear. This guy, the absolute gangster, just turns up with like construction earplugs, jeans and a t-shirt, right, glasses, and he's just pointing like side on, proper Men in Black style, and just shooting. One silver, absolutely demolished a lot of the competition.
Yes.
And that's when you come to when talking about Bill was talking about controlling your own beliefs. He's not judging people based on how they look, or in those first few months when you join the team and you look at these people and go, oh, geez, that person's a little bit, whatever. It's important to give every dog its day, so to speak. The most surprising people will give you the best results at times. You'll never know what's going to work. And it's all about also getting different personalities to mix together. You can't always have a whole bunch of introverts or a whole bunch of extroverts, because that's just a recipe for disaster. Everyone wants the limelight. You want people that kind of mix together. So if you believe your way of doing is the best way of doing, then probably don't stick to that too long. Cool. So next one is ask, don't tell. We'll cover this a little bit, so we won't spend too much time on it. Essentially, if you're going to have a conversation, especially in leadership, especially in coaching, I don't even need to dilute this for most people, I don't believe, but it's surprising how many people need this diluted. Do not tell people what they need to do, but ask them questions to facilitate their awareness and get them to reflect on maybe what they're doing right now isn't the best way to go about things. And also, you might be surprised, you'll probably figure out a better way to do things as well by asking and not telling someone how to do things. Bill?
I said this recently. Coaching someone is actually like Inception if you do it correctly. Like you the idea should not come across as your idea. If you ask enough questions, they will come across and think it's their idea. And there's definitely been times in my past when I've had a coaching session with someone, I've sat down, asked them a ton of questions, just questioning, why do you think that's going to work? Why could you do this? What's going to get in your way? What's going to happen here? And then afterwards, they're like, oh, I've had an idea. That was a fantastic coaching session, Bill. And they've gone away, taken off their idea, and they go around genuinely telling people this is their idea. And they're just like, I thought I was just having this thought, and I just thought maybe I could just do it this way and it'll work. And you just, as a leader, you don't say anything. I think you shared a story when we spoke about this the other day, Julz. I think you had a really good story when this exact thing happened. So rip it.
Yeah, 100%. So I was a coach in a previous job. And one of the people I was working with, they were really struggling with their sales numbers. It was a sales business. And then I had a conversation with them around something that's really easy to convert. All you had to do was ask clients questions, because sales, we know this, Bill, sales is a numbers game, right?
100%.
Especially in contact center environments, especially in high volume environments. It is about asking the question enough and you will get what you ask for. I think I asked the question to him. It goes, okay, hey, if you want to know whether a customer has this product, what would you do? And the answer was in the question I would ask him. And he'd go, yeah, I asked them, I guess. And I go, what's stopping you from doing that? And he goes, nothing. No, oh, okay, cool. So what are you going to do from now on? He's going to ask the customers. Okay, how many times? I did the whole coaching thing around how many times I'm going to do it. And he's like straight away started getting results. Right? Like within the first few calls, he was trying it, got results, and he was flying. Eventually, he was like outperforming everyone in the department around that particular product, just selling like crazy. And a few of the leaders like, hey, mate, you're just like absolutely going home with this. I want you to come and present to the rest of the consultants around how you managed to do this. And he gets up there and he's talking about all this. And they're like, oh, what kind of inspired you? And I was just thinking to myself one day, like, why don't I just ask people? And I was like, sure, you thought about that. Yeah, great. No.
Inception. Coaching is like Inception. You can take that, you can print it, and you can put it on a t-shirt. Maybe I'll have that as my Zoom background tomorrow. Coaching is like Inception. It works.
Now I need another graphic. I need to do another graphic with a t-shirt for you now, Bill, in the video. With coaching is Inception. Is that what you want on the graphic?
Coaching is like Inception, man, 110%. And it is always funny, especially if you take over a team that isn't used to being coached in that ask, not tell method. If they're used to being told things or voluntold, that sort of stuff, you'll have a coaching session and you will do almost nothing. I'm not going to get into ratios or 60-40, 70-30. I don't care. Just ask questions, get them to talk. The amount of times afterwards, they'll literally be like, coaching session was amazing. I thought it was the best coaching session I've ever had. And in reality, I haven't given them any information. I've told them nothing. It's all come from their own thing. I will say this as a little addendum though, as a new leader, there are going to be times when you're going to have to tell people. Ask a lot of questions, but sometimes people just won't know the answers, and don't be afraid to shy away. If they're really lost at sea, to throw the ring out or whatever, because
Give it a fair
happens.
crack. Give it a fair
Yeah.
crack. But you only have so much time, right? Like you got so much of time allotted
Right.
to coach and lead. Mate, if you've got a 30-minute coaching session and the horse doesn't come to water after 29 minutes, you start doing some telling.
Because people just don't know. Like some people, especially if you've got some people who are young, like if they're like 18, 19, it's their first ever job, they have absolutely no idea. Mother's milk still wet on their upper lip. They're not going to know. Like in those instances, try to lead the horse to water. If not, just give them a glass. They'll be all right.
The tip to that is, I think, just putting things in real life scenarios. I think if they've never had experience with the job that you're coaching them on and you're just not getting them to reflect on what's wrong with their process, try to put that in concepts of real life scenarios and analogies that they might understand. So, for instance, if they're really shut down a customer in the first few minutes of a conversation, you can analogy that I tell you is, hey, when you're a kid and you go to your mum and dad and you go, hey, mum, dad, I want to go to Jack's house tonight. And they're like, even before the words leave your mouth, they go, no, not a chance. How did you feel in that moment? And they usually go, nah, not very good. I don't feel like they considered me. They didn't even want to hear my arguments or anything. You're doing the same to the customer. And I think when you do that kind of stuff, then people kind of go, oh, yeah, okay, the penny drops sometimes. So, yeah, if questions don't work, try perspectives, shift perspectives. It's demonstrating that evidence around this is what it looks like and what you're doing to people and demonstrating different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. How would that make you feel? Those kind of things in those kind of situations? You're playing on someone's emotion, on someone's feelings. They're more likely to understand and put that connection together. All right, Julz, what's next? Let's rip it.
Yeah, the next one is never compromise your self-story. So this one's all about your self-branding for you and your people. It's around the stories you tell yourself. So sometimes Bill and I, we're probably really good at delivery and we're bringing the vibes and talking and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes we might tell ourselves a story around we're probably not so good with little processes or maybe not so good with Excel or whatever the case is. Like I had this situation a few months ago. I had to create a bit of a report and like a document to share with like leadership and stuff. And I was waiting for the Excel gurus in the office and they were all busy with different things. And I was like, oh no, like, we won't get this done. And then I was like, you know what? Frick it. I'm just going to go on ChatGPT, search up a few things, figure something out, watch like a million YouTube clips, and then eventually figured out how to put this together. But if I really think about it, it's based on that self-story that I told myself that I'm not good at that. I'm not good at Excel. That's not my shtick. And so we do that often to ourselves. Our consultants do that to themselves as well. I'm not good at this thing. I'm just not friendly. I'm not a bubbly person. But lo and behold, they're talking to their best friend on the phone. They sound plenty bubbly, right? So it's just, you're not bubbly in this situation is what you're trying to say. Yeah. How can we peel back those things and really think about what the stories that we tell ourselves and how we define ourselves in the workplace and in life in general, really? What do you reckon, Bill?
Yeah. I think as a leader, it's really something you have to be very aware of for the people you're coaching. Like really get into the heart of what motivates them, what makes them drive, what gets them ticking, what turns them off. You have to ask these kind of questions because you'll notice they're telling themselves a story sometimes way before they ever will. I remember years ago, I used to be a BDM for an insurance company working with a bank, and my job was to coach the staff on how to sell the insurance. And I remember there's this one lovely girl there, and she was incredible at service, but she was just making no sales, both on our product, other products. She was terrible. But I sat next to her and I was like, customer service is so good. What's going on? When I spoke to her, uncovered exactly this. I'm just not good at sales. Now, I've said this to you before, Julz. In my opinion, service and sales are exactly the same thing. The only difference is at the end, you ask if they want to take it, right? Do you want to buy that? If you do all the same things, you go through the options, you explain the benefits, you talk about how this thing will help them. That's just customer service. You're not doing anything there different. And literally all I did was get her to flip that switch and make her realize that they're actually the same thing. And maybe sometimes the best thing to do to help someone is to sell them something if they have an actual genuine need for it. And it was like a light switch just went off. I could see it almost. She was just like, oh. And once that thing had broken, that actually the story you're telling yourself is a lie, and the ending is completely different to what you think it's going to be, she ended up completely turning around. I sixth sensed her pretty much. Like the ending was just not what she expected. And it was one of those success stories that you think about. That was years ago, and I still think about it all the time. As a leader, that kind of thing is a champagne of victory. Our tag phrase is always the champagne of victory, but it is.
Yeah, I don't know how many people need to hear this, but everyone's a salesperson. Everyone goes through life selling. Think about talking about analogies. Think about your home life, right? If you live with a partner or a roommate, and you need to convince that person to do the dishes, you're selling, right? If you go to a job interview,
100%.
you are selling. You are, even if you're a business analyst, you need to then provide numbers to your boss to get some change happening in your business. You are selling those numbers and what they mean and the story they tell to your boss. So
Yeah.
I think if you haven't embraced that fact, you should, please. Like, honestly, just it is one of the most fundamental things in life that you're always trying to influence someone. I know it sounds really, how can I say, negative almost, like in terms of say that, but it is the
Well, it is.
case, right? Like
It's
we're
true.
always trying to sell ourselves on something. We're trying to convince ourselves of something. If you go to the gym and you're like trying to push through that, it's be like this one more rep, man. Or like you're like running on the treadmill and you're just super tired and you're just like a few more minutes. You know what I mean? Like you're always trying to sell yourself on something. So start to be comfortable with that process. I know it's a bit of a tangent, Bill, but I just thought,
No,
like,
I think this may be, as some of the listeners right now, that is a story you've been telling yourself. You're not a salesperson. We're here to tell you that you are. You absolutely are in some capacity, one way or another. But I guess to tie a bow in that point, I think it is very much just be very aware of the stories your people are telling them. Ask a lot of questions to uncover the truth behind the heart of the matter, and then just basically flip that switch for them. Honestly, it's that simple. It sounds oversimplified, but I think like most of the things in this conversation, if you ask enough questions, they'll have that realization themselves. And it's not that difficult to ask those questions as well. Usually they'll lead you most of the way along, I would say. All right, Julz, what do we got next?
And the next one is never fight a bad habit. Now, the kind of thinking behind this is that it is incredibly hard to actually fight a bad habit. So if you try not to think about the thing you're meant to be doing, so for example, if you're a smoker trying to quit smoking, thinking about not smoking, the easy thing is to replace something in what they call the habit loop. So if you tend to smoke when you go on nights out, right? So you go on a night out, you have a few drinks, and so your habit is to then pick up a cigarette, right? What you might replace that with is take the box of cigarettes with you, but you put some lollipops in there, for example. So when you open that up, you're like, oh, there's no cigarettes in there. So either have the lollipop or you won't smoke at all because you've just taken that out of the equation. Does that make sense? So it's about breaking that habit loop, not fighting it. So not saying, hey, I will never go on a night out because I smoke. That's not possible, right? Eventually you will go on a night out. Eventually you will be confronted with a smoke. So instead of fighting the kind of urge to do that, place it with something else, for example. What's your kind of thoughts on that, Bill?
Very much reminds me of almost every coaching session I've ever had when I'm trying to embed a particular behavior on a phone. And you have those conversations, you'll be asking questions around when's it working, when's it not working. This is usually probably not the initial session. This is usually you've had the conversation, they've gone away, they've tried it, they've done it reasonably well, but it's not fully stuck, which is pretty common, right? And usually you'll get in that situation, and then that's when they'll be like, oh, I usually just don't do it when the customer is difficult. Great. And that's the habit loop. When the customer is argumentative, when the customer is aggressive, I just don't do the thing. And I think in those instances, that's the habit loop that needs to be broken. And you just need to replace the habit of panicking when the customer is aggressive with the routine and structure that we've built, because it actually is most useful in those calls. It's most useful in those interactions to stick to the structure and to maintain control of the call. And I think it comes up a lot in those kind of coaching sessions. And it's really something to keep an eye out for, is when you're trying to embed that new habit, there will come a point where a negative behavior will be the blocker. And you need to discover what that is and then try to like unpick that behavior. I think this is something you're very good at in particular, I think, in coaching sessions, is getting to the heart of that one thing that trips them up and pulling that apart.
I'll keep digging till I get to that point, because I think if you don't understand the habit that then kicks off the bad habit, like this moment before the bad habit starts, that's where you can head it off at the pass. A lot of the time, say for example, let's say a person struggles with a difficult customers, like aggressive customers come through and they fall to pieces the moment this customer gets a bit aggressive or starts pushing them a little bit. A lot of the time what I do is then go, okay, so the moment the customer starts being aggressive, I talk to them about, can you just pause for 10 seconds, right? Because the habit loop there is the moment customer is aggressive, some people go straight into the word vomit.
No answer now.
Or, correct. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Like, what do you want? Refund? Like, and then they just go a bit crazy. So can you pause, take a split second to really think about, okay, what have I practiced here? What is the best course of action here?
Mm.
Lot of conversation frameworks. I think people don't believe in them because they don't stick to them when it's most necessary. I think like them.
Yeah.
I've been through tons of conversation frameworks that none of them are. I'm responsible for a conversation framework right now, but I'm not like none of them are rocket science. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they all make sense. We all know how to have a
Mm.
conversation, but the reason why we need a framework is to guide you through a difficult process. And that's why
Yeah,
all
correct.
frameworks exist. Yeah. Coaching frameworks, leadership frameworks, they're all there to guide you through a difficult process. But as human beings, we tend to not use it when it's difficult. We tend to use it when it's the most easiest for us. I want to understand for this person, okay, why are you not using it at that point? What's stopping you from using it? And it's just you just like getting a deer in headlight situation. So use that moment. Pause for 10 seconds, not forever, but for 10 seconds, just think to yourself, okay, what does a customer tell me? What do I need to answer with that's going to really move this situation on? And then go with that. And then that's enough to break their habit. Just that 10-second pause, etc.
Works for me a lot. The exact same thing is repeating the customer's inquiry. That's why I get my consultant. If you've got someone that calls up and they're really heated, they're really angry, just repeat it back to them almost word for word. Because one, the customer will like hearing it word for word because then they'll be like, oh, this person understands my consultant. But also, it gives my consultant time to think. Whilst they just parrot back whatever the customer said, their brain can kick on and have that little panic loop. And that's something that I find works pretty well as well.
Another little story I've got is about breaking the habit loop. One of the people that I'm most proud of was one of the consultants that I had in previous jobs. She'd come from a very government service environment. So it was a lot of tick and flick getting through. And you know how government contact centers are. Out in there, anywhere in the world, they're horrible. So they treat people like numbers. So she was struggling with the kind of sales service environment, like really making sure you empathize with customers. And one of the things she did was she told me that her family brings a lot of happiness. Like what she like dies for, lives for is her family. And she had a picture of her family in front of her, like right there. So it's a really cheesy exercise. But what I spoke to her about was in between calls, like one before the next call starts, just quickly look at that photo and think the next person you're talking to is your family member, right? And I just told her to try that for 10 calls. And her tone completely changed. She was like a completely different person on the phones from 10 calls. And then within a few weeks or so, she started really click. And she was one of those examples, like bringing in a dancing monkey to training. I should bring her into my workshops I used to do on Conversation. Goes, oh, here's this person. She was like this a few months ago. Now she's like this. And she's going to tell everyone how she converted it around. But she was 100% one of her success stories. And now she's a trainer and doing fantastically well. But a great example of how you can break a habit loop as well.
Perfect. Cool. So what we got next? What's next on our list?
The other one is avoid wallpaper at all costs. Now, this is a conversation I actually had earlier today. The amount of information, updates, messages, and emails that we get on a daily basis, being leaders, being people in frontline consultants, everything starts to become just wallpaper, just something in the background. You don't see it anymore. It's not a part of your kind of priority list anymore because somebody's just banging on about it all the time. And as leaders, we fall into this trap all the time. Like I've started to be a lot more conscious about it now. But how many times do we bang on about certain things? Oh, guys, come on, stop being late. Or, hey, guys, make sure your after call works really good. Or whatever the case is, right? Make sure you're ticking that box. Tick that box, guys. And we say it all the time. Yeah. Eventually, it just becomes just a nagging noise in your head and you just drown it out. It's like hearing the fire alarm and you're just sitting in the room. Eventually, after a day of hearing the fire alarm, you no longer hear the fire alarm. Yeah. So don't be the fire alarm is what I'm trying to say. What do you reckon, Bill?
Is always going to be a million changes a week. And I think it becomes very, like the way that those changes get rolled out by the business tends to be exactly the same every single time. And they expect the consultants to remember it every single time. And I think it's the same for us. The other part of that is when you're talking stats to the team, if someone's like not hitting the numbers, you probably tell them in the exact same way every single time. Oh, come on, mate, your AHT's a bit high today. Hey, mate, what happened yesterday? Your AHT's a bit high. And it just, once it becomes something that you do all the time, you basically do it none of the time. It has no impact. It has no meaning. It doesn't impact the people at all. And so you really have to constantly, as a leader, I think, find new ways to engage your team over very similar topics, or maybe even pivot a little bit around what you're doing. Now, I spoke about this the other day. Something that I do when it comes to getting my team to really understand changes is I made my own game show. So I made a game show that I run every now and then in a huddle. I don't do it all the time because, again, if I do it all the time, it becomes pointless. But my game show is called Casual Reminders. So this is a little hot tip for you guys. You can steal my idea if you want to. You can absolutely, as long as you give me some of the credit. Now, the way that Casual Reminders works is there's 3 rounds. It's full game show. The team have to get themselves off mute in the Zoom, and then they say their name as the buzzer. That's how it works. Other rules are if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And so the cheating is allowed. Because honestly, like when you're in customers, it's an open book. It's not like you're not allowed your resources when you're with customers. But basically, the first round, I'll just genuinely ask a question like, what is 2 + 2? And then they have to answer with the phrase casual reminder 4. Now, if someone just says 4, someone else can jump over, steal their answer. That's how it works. They have to use the word casual reminder at the start of their answer. First round, I usually do a couple questions, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10, something like that. The second round, sometimes I do this as worth double points because, again, it's a game show. That's how game shows work. And the second round is called actually. Now, in the second round, what they have to do is I'll say a statement that's just factually incorrect. Something like 2 + 2 is 5. And then they have to come in and go, actually, and give me the correct information. The bonus point when I do 2 points usually is for really hamming up the actually. Like, I really want them to like lean in and be like, actually? Bonus points. Right? And that just gets the team engaged. It gets the team having a little bit of fun. At the same time, they're like embedding these changes. And then for the final round, it's a game show. Of course, the final round's where all the points are. That's how you win the game show. It doesn't matter if you've not got a single point so far. It's usually just like a multi-choice question. So I'll have one question. That'll be like 10, 15 answers to that question. And whoever throws the most answers out wins. And it's just something I do every now and then. Every single time I run it, the team have so much fun. They enjoy cheating, enjoy stealing off each other. They enjoy tricking someone else, getting the right answers. It just creates a good bit of banter amongst the team. But at the same time, I'm also reinforcing all the changes. And it's so much better than me just being like pulling up a PowerPoint for the 50th time and just being like, guys, these are the changes, blah, 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 reading War and Peace off the slide. We all love that. Monotone probably as well. No doubt you've had a couple of those in your time, Julz. So that's what I do. It's just, I don't do it all the time, but that's just a little example of something you can do to keep it fresh. I know, for example, Julz, you were really hot on using Kahoot. You used to use Kahoot a lot for that sort of stuff as well, hey?
Yeah, I used to mix it up once in a while, run a Kahoot. And sometimes work-related stuff. I'll sneak in work-related stuff with just fun stuff. And it gets them. Gamifying stuff is a great way to
100%.
avoid wallpaper. Because like just the whole game, you're just paying attention to it. And it just comes in a fun and palatable format. Now, like Bill mentioned PowerPoints before. Bill and I, one of our biggest bugbears, we will not message each other faster than when someone reads off a PowerPoint word for word. The moment they start doing it, Bill and I will be on Slack. I can see Bill's bubbles. Oh, Bill will see my bubbles going, bro. Like literally, I cannot stand it. Why are you putting all these words on a PowerPoint if you're just going to read it anyway? Just email it to me, mate. I'll do the justice. You know what I mean? But 100%, you want. Yeah.
Bill and Julz pro tip coming in, and it needs to put it out there. If you are presenting, the slide is to remind you of what you need to say. It is not for the audience to fully read. Key points only. You have all of the points. But the way that PowerPoint works, to be honest with you, you have the second screen. You have the screen that's the PowerPoint, and then you have the other little one that you can put your script in if you need to read the whole script, right? Read the whole script. The PowerPoint is not for you. You don't need everything written on the PowerPoint. I promise you this. It'll change your life. In fact, forget the rest of our podcast. This is the only tip you need. It's the only tip you need. Forget everything else we've said. Just please don't put everything. Don't write War and Peace in your slide.
Yeah, 2 tips.
Sorry, Julz,
you're a salesperson. Second tip, don't read off the podcast. that's what you should do.
Don't read off the prezzo. Yeah, PowerPoint is not there to be read off. I think that's tip number 1. To be honest with you, on a t-shirt. I might have that as my Zoom background. Do not read off the PowerPoint, and then just sit there staring at the presenter the whole time.
One day, if this podcast blows up, Bill, I'm going to get a whole bunch of t-shirts made from Disrupt Leaders t-shirts with all the things we say should be on a t-shirt, and just create a merch out of that. But anyway,
I feel like I need them. I keep wearing polo shirts in these presentations. Maybe I need a Disrupt Leaders.
Yeah,
coaching is Inception. Yeah,
just wear it to cold. Cool. So this kind of leads on to some of the other points. I won't go through in too much detail. We've gone through different episodes around framing. Framing is really important. Going back to the PowerPoint thing, how you frame a message is almost more important than the message itself. It's how people digest this stuff. And also frame, the other thing he talks about is a smart frame will set the plane, which is making sure you frame options that some people might not like, but framing it next to options that they might not like. So it's a bit tricky. It's like a real estate agent. His story about that is a real estate agent showed him three houses. Two houses were just like completely wrong for him, and this one that he was right for him, and he fell in love with the house and he bought it. But essentially, it's how he framed that house. With sometimes giving people options, but actually two of the options are absolute dummies. You don't actually want them to take them. This is the option that's actually going to put them.
Positive alternative choice.
Yeah,
positive alternative choice is how you frame things to your people. I'm going to give you, you're all salespeople. We've spoken about this. I'm going to give you the sales tip. If you want someone to do a thing, if you want to, like a little psychology trick, give them two options, but both of those options are what you want. Little kids are excellent at this. Julz, how many times does your daughter walk up to you with two books in hands and go, Dad, can you read me one of these books? And what do? Do you say no? No, you pick one of the books. It works so often. It is a tip I learned years ago. It's something I used to do on my housemate, and unfortunately he's heard me coach to it now, so I can't do it anymore. But I would literally walk up like, oh, did you want to make the cup of tea before or after you clean the desk? And then just, I'll make the cup of teas now, and then go and make the cup of tea, right? Genius. So yeah, like in terms of framing, positive alternative choice is a really good way. Like you give them two options, but both options are things you want. A little bit of Disrupt Leaders homework for you today. I want you to go to your partner. I don't want you to try to get them to pick a movie, but I want you to suggest two movies that you want to watch and not any others. Just give them two movies they want to watch and see how they go. If that works for you, if they pick one of the two movies, please do drop us a comment. Let us know. I'd love to hear. Our first Disrupt Leaders homework, Julz. How do you feel?
Really good tip. A whole
Are you going to try it?
You know what? The danger of us being coaches and leaders, man. My wife also has had me coach now a few times. So like now the tricks that I use sometimes to get her to do the things I want don't really work because she's, wait a minute.
You positive alternative choicing me, Julz? And you're like, no, I would never do that to you, babe. I love you.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, like really quickly before we move on to another topic that completely backfired on me. So what I used to do those days when my wife used to go to work and she used to come back and she used to tell me all these stories from work. And usually she just works with like under like ladies and usually someone's been doing something or whatever on the workplaces. And so I'll be like, oh yeah, no, she didn't. But I'm not really listening, but I know that those are what she wants to hear. So I'll be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, you shouldn't put up with that. Or like stuff like that. Just agreeing with everything she says. And then, no way, she didn't do that. But I'm not listening. And I told this to my mate at work. And the next time we had a dinner with like our families and stuff, this idiot was like, oh, mate, Julz, I tried your thing out and it like worked like a charm at home and whatever. And my wife said, what did you try out? She's like, Julz is saying like when you tell stories, he just goes here. And I was like, bro, what are you doing right now?
He's dogged you. Are you still friends with him? Because I wouldn't be. He just dogged you.
Unfortunately, I'm still friends with him. Like, completely ratted me out. Moving on, small mistakes create big mistakes. I'm going to steal one of your lines, Bill, right? Is the standard you accept is the standard you walk past is a line.
The standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the walk past is the standard you accept. And that's something that resonated with me and really connects with this message. So essentially, when you're starting off as a leader, especially, if you're seeing little things, and you go, they're only little things, I let them go, whatever. You got to be careful what those things are. Now, not everything can snowball into this, but if you're seeing little kind of sloppy things around the workplace that is happening and you let those things slide, that could eventually snowball to bigger things because people naturally will try and get away with stuff more and more, right? So you want to really make sure from the very beginning you're nipping things in the bud and making sure that even if you're seeing little things, if you feel like it's affecting the end client experience or it's affecting the business negatively, you really want to jump on those things and work with people, as long as you frame it like we said before and make sure that people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. Like I mentioned previously, and it was a previous role of mine where someone said this to me when I was working in a gym, that the standard you walk past is a standard you accept. And it's something that's really stuck to me forever since I heard that. It's been years since I heard it, but I think it all the time now. Every time I'm doing observations with a team and I notice something small, I'm not saying I'm going to nitpick them to pieces, but if there's something that's like objectively wrong or a behavior that they're doing, maybe they frame something quite poorly, it is something you want to get on sooner rather than later. Because if you don't, maybe it's a small behavior like that. Maybe they are framing one particular piece of the conversation incorrectly. That's one customer. How many other customers are they going to have that conversation with this week, this month, 2 months down the track? How long is it till one customer finds the piece of information they provided wrong and it results in an escalation or a complaint? Whereas just having a conversation around, hey, I noticed this, could you try this? Or whatever the case may be. will completely turn that around. And it's something that I think is really worth taking on in every aspect of your life, whether it's work, whatever. Anything that you just let go is something you're absolutely committing 100% that you're fine with the standard that's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting way to live your life when you look at everything in that way. Like skipping the gym and not going to the gym, whether it's like eating extra calories and cheating on your diet, like you do it once, you let it go, it goes forever. It becomes a bigger problem. And I think you've spoken about this before, right? Having one little cheat meal, not going to blow you out of the bank when it comes to the gym. Having
Correct.
6 in a row, probably going to have a bit of
100%.
an impact. And it's the same in the workplace. Those small things add up so quickly you wouldn't believe, especially I would say in new recruits. If you've got new people that you're onboarding, really vital to get on top of those small things early because they do become big things real quick.
Yeah, what you don't say communicates as much as what you do say. So
Correct.
even if something's going on and you don't say something, it's just as much as agreeing. Like it's we all know this. It's like we know when those pro athletes, they get caught doing something that they probably shouldn't be doing, and then they go, "No comment." You might as well comment it, brother, because like literally we know that
Means comment, right?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it's 100%. What you're not saying is saying all you need to say. In a meeting as well, even with managing up, if your leader is saying something that you go, wait a minute, nah, that's not going to be awesome for my people, or it's not going to work out. Voice some of those concerns. Like you're not going to get ahead being a leader by just agreeing to everything because you're going to just be a face in the crowd. And whereas if you jump in and go, wait a minute, again, going back to what we said before, like I get where you're coming from, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about this angle or that angle?
Now, I will say this. I think it's probably something that maybe doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. This doesn't mean that if someone's got like 10 things that they're doing wrong, like you've got a new consultant, they're doing heaps wrong, don't jump on every single one at once. This is more just for those, if you see those problem behaviors, jump on those. But if you've got someone that's obviously doing a lot of things incorrectly, as we've spoken about multiple times on previous episodes, just pick 1 or 2 key behaviors. Don't try to change. Rome wasn't built overnight. Is the concept I want to get into.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to our next point. Geez, Bill, you didn't know it, but you segued this beautifully.
I'm excellent.
It's the power of progression. Harness the power of progression is one of the things that Steven talks about in his book. And it's something that is near and dear to both Bill and I's heart. Like we believe in this 100%. It's picking on those 1%ers, those little things, and that's going to snowball over time. Progress a little bit at a time. Before you know it, you'll be exponentially better. Think about everything in life. And I think the analogy that I used ages ago was like you want to run a marathon. You start by running 1 kilometer today. Maybe you do 2 tomorrow. It sounds not much. But if you follow that kind of mats over 6 months or 3 months, by the end of it, you run 90 kilometers. If you run that mat, that's a lot of run. But unless you're David Goggins, you're probably not going to do 90 kilometers. But if you slowly increase, you're going to get better and better every day. So if you're working on Bill, just hit the nail on the head before. If you think there's like 10 things that people are doing wrong, don't jump on all 10 of them. If you're a new leader, what you should be jumping on is the few easy ones to start off with. Get some easy wins. It's going to make you feel good as a coach and as a leader. You're going to feel good about yourself in terms of getting this person to that point. And they're going to feel amazing about themselves because they've got some wins under their belt. And then from there also, everything that you suggest is just going to have a lot more power because you're like, man, everything Bill's telling me right now is just like, it's working like magic. So they're like, Bill's the guru. Like, Bill, what do you reckon about this? And they're going to be coming to you for more information. What do you reckon, Bill?
Yeah, no, you're exactly bang on, I think. And the old saying, the old adage is progress, not perfection. That's what we're aiming for. And I think if you can get your people into that mindset, I think it'll be really powerful. It's something I'm really important with when I sit down with my people and I'm coaching is when we're setting goals and stuff at the end, I don't expect you to hit, if you're going to take 30 calls, say do it on 30 calls. I just aim for you to do it on more than you did last time. And I want it just to see that continual improvement. We said before, it is a numbers game. So it's just about making sure that the numbers are slightly better than yesterday. And if you just improve that little bit each and every day, eventually it snowballs. Much like we said, small mistakes become big mistakes. Small wins eventually become big wins as well. Like it stacks up the other way. And the more quick runs you can get on the board, more credibility you've got. Julz mentioned as a new leader, it makes you feel good, also makes you look good as well. If you can go to your boss a week in and be like, I had my first coaching session with this person, these are the numbers already increased 30% here, whatever the case may be, makes you look good too. So I think it's one of those things that like, by focusing on the small things and looking to compound rather than trying to change everything at once, you'll definitely get there quicker. Another thing I say all the time, slow is smooth is fast. Aiming to change everything in an overnight is going to achieve nothing. Aiming to slowly achieve things, you will ultimately get there quicker. Are we about Dungeons? Is there any more? Is that the last point? I don't think there's any more left, is there?
Yeah, there's just one more thing I want to bring into, and this is
Very
something
well.
for you to think about as you become more experienced as a leader. You're probably not as a new leader, but definitely as you get more experience, is creating what he says is a cult-like following as a leader. One thing I'm really proud of, even up to now, and it's just like a bit of a pat on my own shoulder, is that the people that I've coached over the past are still keep in touch with me, and I get to join their journey of success. Like I see them on LinkedIn and they message me still and go, Julz, I'm doing this now. And I love that. It brings me a lot of pleasure to see people progress. And not only that, it brings me even more pleasure that after all these years, they're still reaching out and they feel that I'm a person in their lives that they want to share that journey with. I think that's like mad. Like I feel really great about that as a person.
That's what you should.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the way I've done that is I've always taught myself, my first ever leadership gig, one of the first things I ever told myself was, don't be afraid to let people surpass you. I always told myself, if I had people under me and they got better than me eventually and they get to go into other jobs that are better than me or whatever, that's for me is a tick in my leadership box, is a feather in my cap as a coach. And so I'm not really threatened by people that eventually get better than me. That's eventually going to happen. If you meet enough people, some of them are going to be better than you. And so I think I always want to develop people and get people going. And that's the way, not that I have a cult like following, but that's the way I build people to want to share information with me. And I genuinely care for the people I work with and I choose to spend my time with in terms of a leader. What do you reckon, Bill?
Yeah, I think from my perspective as well around this whole like building a cult following, just to I agree with everything you're saying, and this is not counter that. This is very much an addition to that. I think the more that people like want to follow you and want to work for you, the better results they're going to be. And so it's one of those things. It really highlights to me the importance of taking your people on a career journey. Like not everyone in every role is going to want to have a career progression, but if you have that conversation and give someone genuine motivation around their career and help them see the end of the light, help them see the goal where they want to be, one, they'll perform so much harder. Two, if they're just engaged in general, if they like working for you, if you've got those quick wins under the belt, if they think you're fun, they think you keep things varied, you keep things interested, that again are more likely to work harder, more likely to perform better. It is such a simple thing that so many leaders don't understand, that if your team like working for you, they will work harder than if they do not. There's so many, like I said before, we said it in the first episode, I think, don't be a cop. There are so many leaders out there that act like they're a cop, that act like they're there to look after children and punish children when they step out of line. But you notice all of those leaders are the lower performing leaders, the ones that like can engage their people and make them believe in the dream because the dream is real, show them the dream is real. They're the ones that achieve success. And I think it's such a simple but underrated thing just to have people like you as a leader. I've seen it a bunch actually on TikTok recently. It is killing me not to trust your leader, don't talk to your leader, don't be friends with your leader. How dare you be friends with your leader? They're terrible people. I'm sorry, if your leader is, you've got a terrible leader. Like you should absolutely be in a position that you can connect with your leader on a personal and a professional level. And you as a leader, I'm not saying that invite them to your wedding, I'm not saying be their best friend, but you should be connecting with them as human beings and caring for them as human beings. And they should care about you as a human being at the end of the day. I think.
You can invite me and Bill to your weddings.
Absolutely.
We might not bring gifts, but we will bring vibes.
Guaranteed, the special vibes unit will be there in force.
100%.
Couple vinos. I'll dance with your mother. It'll be fine. I'll dance with your father if I have to. Vibes will be on. Vibes will be on.
And I think that's kind of wrapping it all up a little bit. Yeah, I think once again, for those of you who haven't already, I recommend getting the audio book is fantastic. I've got the physical book as well, just because there are graphics in there that really help with the kind of embedding process. But the audio book is fantastic because he's got a silky ass voice, young Steven Bartlett. I can tell you that much for free. But so yeah, get the Diary of CEO is really even for people running their own business. It's really good. Obviously, not all the laws and kind of tenets in there kind of frontline leader based, but it's fantastic. Wrapping it all up as well, Bill, I want to just urge everyone out there who's listening to our YouTube or Spotify podcast. I've noticed that quite a few of you are listening without subscribing. You're naughty. You're being really naughty, aren't you? Now, don't be naughty. Subscribe. I trust you. The more of you who subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or jump on TikTok or Instagram and follow us. It just allows us to pump out more and more of this content because we can get more support and also get more ideas from you guys around what you want to hear and tailor it really to what you guys want out of a leadership podcast as well.
Yeah, and to that end, as always, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please do drop a subscribe. It absolutely, as Jules said, helps us out a ton. Please drop a comment as well. We're keen to hear from you. If there's anything you like, if there's any of the tips that you try, please drop a comment. We always want to hear it. If you need anything that you want us to talk about, anything you want us to go over and discuss, absolutely let us know. And before I sign off, just one last time, do not put all of the writing on the PowerPoint when it comes to a presentation. You do not need to. It is only little lines to remind you of what you wish to talk about.